May 27th, 1940. 6:12 a.m. Lepanette, France. A thin gray mist drifts over the potato fields, still damp from the night rain. The air is cold enough that you can see your breath if you exhale too hard. Somewhere in the distance, German machine guns tap out short metallic bursts, echoing off stone farmhouses. Captain Jack Churchill presses his back against a mossy stone wall. His fingers are numb, but his grip is steady. In his left hand is something no sane officer in the British Expeditionary Force is supposed to be holding in 1940. A 6-foot English longbow made of yew. He lifts it slowly, the way a musician raises an instrument he has played for years. The bow creaks. The string tightens. Every movement is quiet, deliberate. You can almost feel the tension running through the wood. 30 yards ahead, 3 Wehrmacht scouts advance through the fog. Their boots sink into the soft earth with slow, cautious steps. They talk under their breath. Rifles at the ready. One of them, a sergeant with square jaw and a steel-gray helmet tilted low, scans the hedgerow. He never looks up. Churchill draws. The arrow feels alive between his fingers. His muscles hold, steady and unshaking, the way archers have done for centuries. For a moment, time seems to stop. Then he releases. The arrow cuts through the mist with a whisper. No flash, no bang, no warning. It strikes the German sergeant clean in the chest. The man collapses without a sound, dropping to his knees, eyes wide in disbelief. His comrades stumble back, looking around wildly, confused by a kill they never saw or heard. To them it must have felt like witchcraft, something ancient and wrong tearing into a modern battlefield. Churchill doesn't wait. He ducks behind the wall, already reaching for another arrow. The adrenaline rushes through him, sharp and electric. Somewhere behind him, a British corporal whispers, "Sir, what the hell are you doing?" But Churchill already knows the answer. He isn't here to fight like everyone else. He's here to fight like himself. And that means a longbow, a two-handed claymore, and a belief that fear can be a weapon as real as steel. What the men around him don't know is this. This wasn't a stunt. It wasn't madness. And it wasn't the last time he'd do it. Because over the next 3 days, Jack Churchill will kill 7 German sergeants using tactics no one in the War Office would ever approve and no enemy would ever expect. And the arrow lying in that French field will become the first confirmed bow kill of the modern era. But this morning in the fog, Churchill's story is just beginning. And the Germans are about to learn why the British officer with the bow is the most dangerous kind of soldier. The kind who believe the old ways still work. The gunfire fades for a moment, replaced by the distant rumble of engines moving along the Dunkirk road. Churchill slips back from the stone wall, bow in hand, and the men around him stare like they're looking at a ghost. No one knows what to say. No one wants to be the first to ask the question hanging in the air. Why bring a medieval weapon to a modern war? To understand that, you have to go back years before France, long before the retreat, to a man who simply refused to fit into the age he was born in. John Malcolm Thorpe Fleming Churchill. Jack, to anyone who knew him, never liked the idea of being ordinary. Before the war, he was an officer buried in paperwork. He was a motorcycle racer, a stunt archer, a bagpiper who could make a parade come alive. He drifted toward anything that felt dangerous, stylish, or simply more interesting than normal life. If you were standing in front of him, you wouldn't see a strange man. You'd see someone who looked carved out of confidence, someone who carried himself like a hero from an older century. The kind of man who didn't just play the part. He lived it. And when the world plunged into war again in 1939, Churchill knew exactly who he wanted to be on the battlefield. Not another officer hidden behind sandbags. Not another man with the same rifle, the same helmet, the same fear. He wanted to bring something different, something ancient, something psychological. Because Churchill understood something most commanders didn't. Sometimes a weapon didn't just kill. Sometimes it shaped the mind of the enemy. A German soldier expecting bullets might stand tall. A German soldier hit by an arrow in 1940 would question everything. Back in France, Churchill moves across the hedgerow, bow raised, eyes focused. The British squad follows him, still trying to decide if they're inspired or terrified. The mist hangs thick, muffling every sound, turning each field into its own private world. "Keep low," Churchill whispers, "and stay quiet." He's calm, almost too calm, like this is a sport he's trained for his entire life. Maybe it is. Every movement is smooth and practiced. He knows exactly how to position himself, exactly how to draw without getting silhouetted, exactly how to disappear again. Behind him, the corporal mutters, "Sir, we got rifles." Churchill doesn't look back. "Aye," he says softly, "but they have ears." He spotted another German patrol moving along a dirt lane, 5 soldiers scanning the fences and tree line. The Wehrmacht expects gunfire. They expect noise. They expect the usual. What they don't expect is the whisper of a bowstring. Churchill draws again. The arrow pulls tight. His breath steadies. This isn't theater. This isn't madness. This is calculation. And as he releases a shot, you can tell he isn't just fighting a war. He's proving a point. The arrow flies. The patrol freezes. Another German sergeant falls without ever seeing his attacker. 2 kills. Same silence. Same confusion. Churchill's squad exchanges uneasy glances. Their respect is shifting into something else, a realization that the man leading them operates in a way no manual can teach. But something bigger is coming. Churchill knows he won't be able to hold this line long. The mist is lifting, and with it, the Germans' patience. Within hours, the field around Lepinette will turn into a desperate fight for survival, and Churchill's bow will become more than a weapon. It will become a message. By midday, the fog thins across Lepinette. Sunlight cuts through in narrow beams, turning the mud a dull bronze. The British lines are shrinking fast. Everyone feels it. The push toward Dunkirk is tightening like a noose, and every hour the Germans press harder. Churchill studies the field with the same calm he had at dawn. His longbow rests across his back now, wrapped in cloth to break its shine. His men grip their rifles with white knuckles. They're listening for engines, boots, anything that tells them what's coming next. They don't have to wait long. A German platoon pushes out from the tree line, moving fast and heavy, rifles up, helmets low. They're not probing anymore. They're hunting. A squad leader shouts orders. You can feel the tension roll across the field like static. Churchill raises his hand. His men freeze. Most officers would order suppressive fire. Most would try to pull back to the next hedgerow. Churchill has a different idea. He slips along a ditch, boots sinking into the cold mud, and takes a position beside a broken fence. He reaches over his shoulder. The bow comes free. His men exchange looks. They know what's about to happen, but they still can't believe it. The Germans advance in a line, steady and confident. They communicate with sharp gestures, eyes sweeping the terrain. These aren't scouts. They're veterans, and they're expecting resistance. What they're not expecting is a 6-foot arrow to cut through the air between them. Churchill draws until the bowstring nearly touches his jaw. His breath slows. His fingers loosen. The arrow launches. It hits another German sergeant square in the shoulder, dropping him instantly. 2 soldiers shout in panic and dive for cover. One points to the hedgerow, shouting something that sounds half command, half horror. Bogan shuts. Archer, even hearing the word out loud, creates a strange chill. This isn't the Middle Ages. This is 1940. Yet here they are, facing something that feels like it escaped from a history book. Churchill pulls back for another shot. This time the Germans scatter, unsure where the attack came from. They fire in the wrong direction, bullets ripping through a barn wall behind his squad. Churchill takes advantage of confusion. Another arrow, another draw, another sergeant dropped. 3 in one day. His men are starting to understand the real weapon at work. It's not the bow. It's the fear, the silence, the psychological punch of a kill that makes no sound and leaves no clear signature. As evening settles in, the Germans fall back to regroup. The field grows quiet again, broken only by distant artillery rumbling toward Dunkirk. But Churchill isn't done. Night comes cold and sharp. The squad huddles behind a barn, trying to catch their breath. Fog creeps across the fields again, thickening near the hedges. Churchill watches it roll in, relaxed, almost thoughtful. One of his privates asks, "Sir, why the bow?" "Really?" Churchill smiles just a little. "Because it makes him nervous," he says. He turns back to the darkness, listening. Somewhere out there, another German patrol is moving in, and Churchill already knows how he'll greet them. He tightens his grip on the bow, eyes narrowing at the shifting shadows. Tomorrow, he'll kill again, and by the end of the third day, German sergeants across this sector will be whispering rumors about a British officer who hunts in silence. Just before dawn, Churchill hears footsteps, soft, cautious, getting closer. He rises from the mud. The bow lifts. The string tightens. He's ready. May 29th, 1940. 4:41 a.m. A pale blue light spreads across the fields outside Lepanette. The fog settles low, thick enough to hide a man crouched in the right spot. Churchill kneels beside a narrow ditch, bow in hand, boots wet from the night dew. He hasn't slept more than an hour. None of them have. The retreat toward Dunkirk is in full swing, and every British unit is fighting just to buy time. But Churchill is focused on something else. Footsteps. Close. Careful. A German patrol edges through the mist. 6 men in stagger formation. Their sergeant holds up a fist. Suddenly tense. He senses something. Maybe it's the way the bird stopped. Maybe it's the stillness in the hedgerow. Maybe it's instinct. But it's already too late. Churchill rises slowly, as if lifted by the morning light itself. The longbow arcs up with him, smooth and silent. The motion is almost graceful. You could mistake it for a performance if the stakes weren't life and death. The sergeant turns toward the sound. He sees the shadow of a man. He never sees the arrow. It hits him clean. One more silent kill. One more German leader drop with no flash or muzzle report. His men spin around in panic, firing blindly. Churchill doesn't move. He waits, holds, listens. Another shot opportunity opens at the edge of the fog. He draws again, releases. A second sergeant goes down, gasping, clutching an arrow he was never trained to expect. By sunrise, Churchill has scored 2 more kills. That brings the count to 7. 3 days, 7 sergeants, all with a weapon the War Office considered a joke. Word spreads through nearby German units fast. Soldiers whisper about an English officer who stalks the fields with a bow. Some call him a ghost. Others call him a relic. But all of them feel the same cold unease. If you can't hear your attacker, how do you fight him? Churchill's squad sees it too. The Germans hesitate now. They advance slower. They scan the hedgerows with wide, uncertain eyes. Fear has crept in, soft and corrosive. That was the point. For Churchill, the bow isn't nostalgia. It's strategy. Silence confuses. Arrows unnerve. And panic buys time. Time is the one thing the British Expeditionary Force needs more than anything as the pocket tightens around Dunkirk. But with each kill, Churchill also becomes more exposed. The Germans are adapting. Their patrols grow larger. Their officers more cautious. They start sweeping the fields in overlapping patterns, searching for the silent hunter who keeps taking out their sergeants. By mid-morning, Churchill knows the window is closing. The longbow has done its job, but the next phase of the fight will be louder, faster, and far more dangerous. He looks toward the distant coastline. Smoke rises in thin black columns. Ships cluster near the horizon like gray ghosts. The evacuation has begun, and if Churchill and his men are going to survive, they'll have to fight their way through a tightening ring of German forces, using rifles, grenades, and whatever is left of their strength. Churchill slings the bow across his back one last time and signals his men forward. "Move fast," he says quietly. The road won't stay open. They start toward Dunkirk, unaware that in the hours ahead, Churchill will switch from bow to broadsword and carve out a place in military history no one imagined a modern soldier could claim. Because the archer is only one side of him. The warrior is the other. The closer they get to Dunkirk, the louder the world becomes. Artillery thumps in constant waves, rolling over the fields like distant thunder. Columns of smoke rise from burning barns and shattered trucks. The air smells like cordite and wet earth. Every unit in the retreat is moving fast now. Boots pounding the road, vehicles grinding past with blown tires and dented fenders. Churchill leads his men along a narrow farm track that cuts toward the coastal highway. His longbow is still strapped across his back, but in his right hand, he carries something even more surprising. A Scottish claymore. A two-handed broadsword that glints in the smoke-filtered light. His men don't question it anymore. They've seen what he can do with obsolete weapons. They've watched him turn the battlefield into something the Germans can't quite understand. But the sword still draws stares from other retreating units. One lieutenant calls out, "Planning to duel them, Jack?" Churchill just smiles. If the opportunity presents itself, it doesn't take long. A German machine gun nests its ahead, dug into a sunken road beside a wrecked cart. The gun crew has a perfect angle on the path Churchill's men need to cross. Every minute the position stays active, more British troops fall back under its fire. Churchill studies the battlefield fast. No good cover, no easy flank, and no time. He steps out of the ditch, sword raised in one hand, a grenade in the other. His men call after him, alarmed, but he moves with the confidence of someone who trusts his instincts more than the odds. "Wait for my signal," he says. Then he charges. For a moment the Germans stare, stunned by the sight of a British officer running at them with a blade nearly as tall as a rifle. One soldier fumbles to adjust the MG-34. Another shouts and reaches for a magazine. Churchill pulls the pin on the grenade and throws it in one clean arc. It lands at the edge of the nest. The explosion tears through the position. Shouts. Splintered wood. Dirt thrown into the air. Before the smoke even clears, Churchill jumps into crater, sword swinging in a wide, controlled arc. The steel cuts through confusion and panic. A stunned German corporal tries to raise his weapon, but hesitates the instant he sees the blade coming at him. That half second is all Churchill needs. His men arrive seconds later, tackling the last survivor and securing the position. When the shooting stops, they stare at their captain again. Not with disbelief this time, but with something closer to admiration. He just shrugs, wipes the blade clean on a torn tarp, and slings it over his shoulder. Let's keep moving. Word spreads down the retreating column almost instantly. There's an officer up ahead who attacks machine gun nests with a broadsword. Some say he's lost his mind. Others say he's the only one holding his nerve. Either way, morale lifts whenever he passes. Men straighten up a little. Some grin, in a retreat defined by chaos and loss. Churchill feels like a spark of something older and braver. But the danger is far from over. German armor is closing in. Stuka bombers scream overhead. Roads jam with troops, vehicles, and wounded men desperate to reach the beaches. And somewhere behind them, the sergeants Churchill killed have left a mark on the German leadership. Their patrols are hunting harder now, angrier, more determined to catch the silent archer who humiliated them. As the column pushes closer to Dunkirk, Churchill senses something shifting. The enemy is adapting. They're studying him, tracking him. The quiet fear he planted is turning into focused attention. He tightens his grip on the sword. The next fight won't be won by surprise. It won't be won by silence. It'll be won face to face, steel against steel, at the edge of the collapsing pocket. And that fight is only hours away. The road into Dunkirk narrows into a funnel of exhausted men, limping mules, abandoned gear, and shattered trucks leaking oil into the dirt. The sky rumbles with distant bombing. Every few minutes, a column of smoke rises where another unit has been caught by Stukas. Churchill pushes a squad along the edge of the column, sword in one hand, helmet crooked from hours of sprinting, ducking, and firing. His uniform is caked with dust and dried mud. He's been awake for nearly 2 days straight, but his eyes stay sharp. Up ahead, officers shout for units to form a rear guard. The pocket is collapsing faster than predicted. If the line breaks now, the road to the beaches will become a massacre. Churchill doesn't wait to be ordered. He steps toward the nearest company commander. "Where do you need us?" The commander points toward a farmhouse that overlooks a small bridge. German infantry are pushing from the north, trying to cut the retreat. If they take that bridge, they'll split the British column in half. No one's holding that ground. The officer says, "We don't have enough men." Churchill glances at his squad. They're tired to the bone, but ready. He nods once. "We'll take it." They move fast through a maze of hedges and burned-out wagons until the farmhouse comes into view. The roof is half gone, windows shattered. A dead cow lies in the yard, flies buzzing over it. The bridge beyond is quiet, for now. Churchill lifts his binoculars. Movement. A German assault group advancing in stagger formation, rifles raised, machine gun team in the center. They're disciplined and alert, the kind of troops who know how to break a weak position. Churchill turns to his men. "Set up in the upper floor. Keep the rifles tight. Save your ammo." They rush inside. Floorboards creak. Dust hangs in the air like smoke. Churchill plants himself at a blown-out window and steadies his breathing. The Germans cross the field fast. Too fast. Then the first shot rings out. A German private drops. The rest scatter behind the stone fence. The fight begins. Bullets punch through the farmhouse walls, throwing splinters across the room. Churchill fires short bursts, conserving ammo. His men do the same. German grenades arc toward the house. Churchill grabs them and hurls them back before they explode. The building shakes. The field fills with smoke. Every shot echoes like a hammer blow. But the Germans aren't pulling back. They regroup behind the fence and prepare to storm the farmhouse. The machine gun lays down a curtain of fire. A squad begins creeping toward the front door, staying low, using debris for cover. Churchill sees it happening. He knows the pattern. They're about to breach, hard and fast. He slings his rifle, grabs the sword, and heads the stairs. The men stare at him, stunned. "Sir, what are you?" "Hold this floor," Churchill says. "I'll handle the first wave." He reaches the ground level just as the German squad rushes the entryway. A grenade lands by the door. Churchill kicks it back out and charges in behind it. The explosion blinds the assault team for a heartbeat. That heartbeat is enough. He hits the first soldier like a storm, blades sweeping in a tight arc. The second man stumbles back, firing wild. Churchill ducks the shot, slams him into the wall, and knocks his rifle away. The squad falls apart. Some retreat. Some freeze. Some try to fight a man who looks like he stepped out of another century. By the time Churchill's men reach the stairs, the yard is quiet again. Smoke drifts through the doorway. German boots lie scattered in the dirt. Churchill stands in the middle of it all, breathing hard, sword still in his grip. His men don't cheer. They're too stunned for that. But something changes in the room. Fear lifts. Resolve hardens. They're following a man who refuses to lose. Not to numbers, not to fear, not to an enemy expecting him to break. But the bridge still isn't safe. More Germans are coming. Their armor hasn't even arrived yet. Churchill wipes the blade on a fallen tarp. "We hold until command tells us to fall back," he says. Not a minute earlier. Outside, another German whistle cuts through the smoke. The next attack is already on the way. The second assault doesn't take long to form. Churchill hears it before he sees it. Boots running in tight formation, the metallic clatter of MG-34 belts, the low bark of an officer giving hand signals. The farmhouse walls feel thinner with every passing minute. His squad reloads in silence. No one speaks. No one needs to. They all know what's coming. Churchill peeks through a crack in the window frame. Another German platoon, stronger than the first, moves through the smoke. Their helmets glint in the shifting light. Their formation is tight, steady, disciplined. This isn't a probing force. This is a clearing team. And they're angry. You can tell by the speed. You can tell by the posture. They want the house, and whoever is inside. Churchill lowers the binoculars and rests his hand on the hilt of the sword. Not dramatic, not for show. Just steadying himself. A familiar weight. A reminder he's made stranger odds bend before. He turns to his men. "Keep control of your fire. They'll try to flank left." One of his corporals swallows hard. "Sir, how long do we hold them?" Churchill listens to the distant rumble from the beaches. Ship horns. Engines. Gunfire echoing against the harbor walls. Long enough. There's no time to explain more. The Germans hit fast. Fire explodes against the farmhouse. Glass, plaster, and bits of brick blast inward. The machine gun lays down a punishing stream that pins the upper floor. 2 rifle teams rush the left side, using the stone troughs and fallen wagons for cover. Churchill grabs a Bren gun, braces it on a blown-out windowsill, and opens up. The recoil shakes the frame. A German rifleman drops. Another rolls into the ditch, firing back. The air fills with dust and gun smoke. His men shift positions constantly, calling out movement, slapping in new magazines. They hold off the first push, then the second. But the Germans keep coming, pressing harder each time, testing the defenses. A grenade lands on the stairs. Churchill dives forward, kicks it back down, and presses against the wall as it detonates outside. The blast rattles the whole building. Smoke pours through the doorway. Then silence. A bad kind of silence. It means they're regrouping for something bigger. Churchill steps into the center of the room. His men stare at him, dirty, exhausted, half deaf from the gunfire. He speaks calmly. They're going to try the rear door. Be ready. Seconds later, the rear windows shatter. Shadows pour through the thick smoke. German voices shout overlapping orders. The breach begins. Churchill doesn't hesitate. He sprints toward the stairs, grabs a sword, and leaps down the last steps 2 at a time. He hits the ground floor as 2 Germans break through the doorway, rifles raised. Steel flashes. 1 man drops instantly. The second fires, the round grazing Churchill's sleeve before he crashes into him and takes him down hard. More footsteps thunder behind them. Churchill vaults over a broken beam and swings wide, forcing the Germans back into the doorway. The confined space turns the sword into a wall of motion they can't push past. Upstairs, his men unleash hell, pouring fire into the back windows to stop the flanking team. The farmhouse shakes under the assault, but it holds a little longer. The Germans fall back again. Not far, just enough to regroup, call up more men, maybe even wait for armor. Churchill drags a table in front of the door and braces it with debris. He grips the sword's handle tighter. His ears ring. His arms ache. His men are moments from collapse. But then, over the wind, horns blare from the coastal road. A British motorcycle dispatch rider skids to a stop outside the fence. He shouts over the gunfire. Orders from brigade. Fall back to the beach. Now, you've done enough, go. Churchill locks eyes with him. For the first time all day, relief hits his face. He turns to his squad. You heard him. Grab everything you can carry. We're leaving. They rush out to the side door, moving fast, weaving between smoke and bodies. The Germans shout as they notice the retreat, but the British column has already begun pulling away from a farmhouse line. Churchill is the last to leave. He glances back at the battered building, the shattered doorway, the broken earth around it. It's not victory, but it's survival. And survival is the only victory left in Dunkirk. He slings the sword across his back and sprints toward the road, joining the river of exhausted soldiers heading toward the sand and the waiting ships. Behind him, the Germans advance again, but they're too late. The line held, just long enough. The closer Churchill gets to the beach, the louder the world becomes. Engines roar, officers shout, artillery thumps in the distance. The air tastes like salt and smoke. The dunes ahead look more like a battlefield than a coastline. Craters, burned out lorries, abandoned rifles, and thousands of exhausted men waiting for a miracle. It doesn't feel like an evacuation. It feels like the end of something. Churchill's squad pushes through the crowd, weaving past wounded soldiers lying on stretchers, medics calling for morphine, men staring blankly at the sea as if wondering whether they'll ever touch British soil again. Then the horizon appears. A line of destroyers, trawlers, yachts, and lifeboats stretches across the water like a floating chain. Columns of smoke coil into the sky, where Luftwaffe bombs have struck. Every few minutes, a ship sounds its horn, the deep note rolling across the waves like a heartbeat. Churchill stops for a moment, not to rest, to take it in. These are the men he just bought time for. These are the men who get to live because he held the farmhouse a little longer. His lungs burn. His uniform is shredded. His sword looks like something dug from a medieval battlefield. But he stands tall, clearing the last dune and stepping onto the sand with the same calm he had 3 days earlier when he knocked an arrow behind the stone wall at Lepanette. One of his men limps beside him. "Sir, I can't believe we made it." Churchill gives a tired smile. "We're not over the water yet." A sudden scream cuts through the noise. A Stuka dives from the clouds, siren wailing. The crowd scatters, throwing themselves into sand as the bomb drops. The blast shakes the beach. Sand rains down in thick clouds. A stretcher flips over. Soldiers scramble to pull the wounded back up. Another Stuka follows. Then another. Churchill's squad dives behind an overturned rowboat. Machine gun fire rips across the shoreline. The Luftwaffe is hunting the evacuation, trying to break it before it can fully form. Commanders shout for units to spread out. A few British AA gunners fire back, their barrels glowing red from constant use. Lines unravel. Men run for cover. Officers sprint between groups trying to keep order. Churchill rises halfway, eyes on the sky. His instincts kick in. We need to get these men moving. Break the panic. He grabs 2 soldiers who are frozen beside a supply crate. Up. Get to the east pier. Move. His tone snaps them out of it. They sprint toward the water. Churchill turns to his squad. "We escort wounded first. Then find a boat. Stay tight." They form a wedge and push toward a group of medics carrying stretchers. Shells crash into the sand behind them. The pier looms ahead, narrow, crowded, and barely standing after hours of bombardment. A sergeant at the pier entrance shouts at Churchill as he approaches. "Are you the one with the sword?" Churchill nods once. "Then get your men up. We need officers at the front to stop the bottleneck." Churchill doesn't waste a second. He pushes through the chaos, raising the sword, not as a threat, but as a signal. Something visible. Something unmistakable. A strange kind of banner. Men straighten when they see it. They make space. They fall into rough order. Sometimes leadership is nothing more than showing the shape of confidence when everyone else feels hollow. The Stukas come in again. Bombs whistle. Everyone ducks. Except Churchill. He stands firm at the edge of the pier, shouting for the next line to move forward. His voice cuts through the noise. His calm spreads like a steadying hand. One boat fills. Another approaches. The tide rises. Step by step, Churchill's squad moves down the pier. They help lift wounded onto a fishing trawler, then climb aboard themselves, exhausted beyond words. As the boat pulls away, the beach shrinks behind them, thousands of men still waiting, smoke curling above them, the distant boom of artillery echoing across the water. Churchill rests the sword across his lap. The blade reflects the morning sun. He isn't thinking about medals or stories or the strange legacy he's just written into history. He's thinking about the next fight, the next landing, the next moment he can push back. Because Dunkirk isn't the end of Jack Churchill. It's the beginning. He looks out to sea, jaw set, eyes steady. The war took his longbow. It tried to take his men. It nearly took the beach. But it never took his will. And the man who carried a medieval sword into the German onslaught isn't finished yet. Not even close. June 17th, 1944. The rain came down in thin needles over the Italian village of Molina, turning the stone paths slick and dark. Captain Jack Churchill moved like a shadow through the ruined alleys, his claymore on his hip, his longbow wrapped in oilcloth across his back. You can almost hear his boots sliding over wet cobblestone. The world felt close. Too close. He wasn't supposed to be here alone. His men were still pushing through the outer ridge, and the German patrols had slipped deeper into the village faster than anyone expected. But Churchill never waited when a gap appeared. He stepped into it. A single lantern glowed on the far side of a courtyard. Its weak light caught the outline of 2 Wehrmacht sergeants checking a collapsed doorway. They were tense, muttering, rifles angled outward. Churchill ducked behind a cracked fountain, heart steady. Always steady. He eased the longbow free and felt the limb flex beneath his hand. The weapon was old, simple, silent. His fingers found a fletching by memory. He rose. Rain tapped against the arrowhead as he drew. The courtyard felt suspended in time. The sergeants didn't hear a thing. The first arrow hit the nearest man just beneath the collarbone. He dropped without a cry, knees buckling. The second sergeant spun around, confused, eyes wide, trying to find a shot. The shooter, anything. Churchill's second arrow was already on the string. It left his bow with a soft hiss. The sergeant froze, staggered, and fell. Churchill slipped back into the alley before their bodies even settled. No shouting, no alarms, only rain. He kept moving through the maze of stone houses, stepping over shattered roof tiles and broken shutters. Every few yards he paused, listening. The German positions were scattered, tense, unstable. The perfect environment for a man like him. Then he heard it. A faint cry. British. Close. Churchill rounded a corner and found two wounded Royal Fusiliers pinned behind a cart, bullets chewing into the wall above them. A German MG position was tucked behind a ridge of sandbags near the church steps, firing in tight bursts. The bow wouldn't reach from here, but the claymore would. He set the longbow aside and drew the heavy Scottish broadsword. The blade glimmered under the street lamp, long, cold, and unmistakable. He broke into a sprint before the machine gun crew even registered movement. The gunner shouted. Too late. Churchill hit the sandbags like a wave. The claymore crashed down. The loader scrambled backward into the doorway of the church, trying to raise his rifle. Churchill kicked it away and drove him into the wall. The fight ended as fast as it started. Silence spread through the square. Even the rain seemed to quiet. The wounded Fusiliers stared at him, wide-eyed. One of them finally managed to speak. Sir, were you carrying a sword? Churchill gave a small nod, wiping the blade on a piece of torn fabric. Any officer who goes into battle without one, he said, is dressing properly. It was the same line his men always heard, and it never sounded like a joke. But the moment didn't last, because the church bell above them rang softly, once, moved by something that wasn't the wind. Churchill looked up, eyes narrowing. Someone else was inside. Something was waiting for him in the dark. The church doors hung open just enough to show a sliver of darkness inside. The bell's echo still lingered in the rafters, a slow metallic vibration that prickled the back of Churchill's neck. You can almost feel the cold draft rolling out through the gap, carrying the smell of dust, candle wax, and wet stone. He stepped through. The door creaked as he nudged it wider with his shoulder. Moonlight leaked through shattered stained glass windows, scattering red and blue fragments across the pews. Every shard caught glints of rainwater from the storm outside. The flicker made the place feel alive. Somewhere high above, a wooden board shifted. Churchill moved quietly between the benches, sword held low. His bow hung at his back like a sleeping animal. He scanned the shadows behind the altar, under the arches, along the choir loft. No movement. Then he spotted it. A muddy boot print on the steps leading up to the bell tower ladder. Fresh, heavy, German issue. He reached for the first rung and climbed. Each step groaned. Dust drifted down past his face. The higher he went, the narrower the tower became, the walls closing around him like the throat of an old stone beast. His breathing grew louder in the cramped space, but his heartbeat stayed slow, predictable, trusted. Halfway up, he saw the flicker of a lantern. Someone had climbed ahead of him and wedged a light into a corner of the tower. Its flame swung gently, casting long, crooked shadows across the beams. The shadows moved like figures watching him from inches away. Churchill kept climbing. Near the top, he stopped. A faint metallic click echoed above him, followed by the soft scrape of boots shifting on wood. He recognized that sound. Every soldier did. A safety lever pushed halfway back into position. A rifle being brought to the shoulder. He pressed his back against the inner wall and whispered to himself. Too predictable. The shot came down through the dark. Splinters burst from the rung by his hand. The tower shook under the gunfire, the bell rope swaying wildly beside him. Churchill grabbed the rope and swung hard to his left, letting gravity carry him past the next opening. He landed on a narrow beam with a thud. The German sergeant at the top turned toward the sound, rifle ready. But Churchill was already moving. The claymore whipped upward in a bright arc, steel slicing past the lantern's glow. The rifle clattered across the floorboards. The sergeant stumbled backward, tripping over a support beam as Churchill closed the distance. The fight lasted seconds. When it ended, the lantern rolled to the edge of the platform and went dark. Only the stormlight through the slats remained. Churchill stood at the top of the tower, breathing quietly again. But as he looked down toward the church floor, he realized something was wrong. The front door was open wider now. Someone had entered behind him, and they weren't climbing the ladder. Churchill froze at the edge of the bell tower platform. The storm kept whispering through the slats, but something in the church below felt different now. Still, intentional, like the building itself was holding its breath. He crouched and peered through a break in the planks. A figure moved between the pews. Not rushed, not confused. Slow, careful, calculated. Whoever had entered wasn't hunting blindly. They knew exactly where he was. You can picture the lantern glow sliding across the figure's helmet as they passed through a fractured patch of moonlight. The uniform was unmistakable. Wehrmacht infantry, but heavier gear than the others. A sergeant major, maybe, decorated, experienced. And he wasn't alone. Two more moved behind him, keeping spacing like men who had survived more than one street fight. Their rifles stayed tight to their shoulders, muzzles drifting upward toward the tower. Churchill exhaled through his nose. 3 against 1 wasn't the problem. 3 against 1 inside a narrow stone church was. Sound carried too easily here. He sheathed his claymore and reached for the longbow. The curve of the wood felt familiar in his palm. So did the string tension. He slid an arrow free, braced one knee against the platform, and lined up a shot to the gap in the floorboards. But before he drew, one of the Germans stopped. He looked up. The soldier wasn't reacting to sound. He wasn't reacting to movement. He was reacting to a pattern. A faint drip of rainwater falling from Churchill's coat. 6 drops on stone. Even rhythmic. Unnatural in a building with no roof leaks. The soldier barked a warning. Churchill didn't hesitate. He drew and released in one fluid movement. The arrow punched straight through the floorboard gap and hit the first German under the cheekbone. He fell backward into a pew, crashing hard. The others scrambled for cover. Gunfire erupted. Bullets tore up to the tower floor, splintering with inches from Churchill's boots. He leapt sideways, sliding behind a support beam as debris rained down beside him. The smell of gunpowder flooded the air. The Germans spread out now, firing in coordinated bursts. They were trying to pin him, force him down the ladder, trap him at the choke point. It was a smart move. But Churchill never followed someone else's plan. He tucked the bow back over his shoulder and crawled across the beam until he reached the bell rope. It swayed gently from the gunfire, stretching down into the church like a lifeline. He gave it a quick tug, and then he jumped. The rope yanked him downward in a controlled slide. His boots skimmed the air as he dropped toward the nave, the bell above him swinging wildly in the storm wind. The Germans whipped their rifles upward, eyes wide. By the time they fired, he was already past them. He hit the ground behind the last man and drew the claymore mid-motion. The blade caught the lantern light again, and for a moment the whole church glowed with its reflection. One stroke, then another. The second soldier hit the floorboards before he even realized he'd been cut. The sergeant major spun, roaring something guttural, raising his weapon. But Churchill was already within arm's reach. The claymore drove forward, knocking the rifle aside. They crashed into a pew, smashing it apart. The sergeant fought like a man who refused to die inside a church. Strong, desperate, trained. He punched. He clawed. He grabbed Churchill's coat and pulled him close, reaching for a knife at his belt. Churchill's knee drove into his stomach, forcing a gasp. The knife fell. Then Churchill pressed a claymore to the sergeant's throat. The fight left the man's eyes, but Churchill's didn't soften. "Drop it," he said. The sergeant obeyed. For the first time since entering the village, the church was silent again, but Churchill's grip tightened, because behind a defeated sergeant, he saw something he hadn't expected at all. Boot prints. Fresh. Leading deeper into the crypt. More men had entered before any of them. The sergeant major lay still against the broken pew, chest heaving, eyes unfocused. Churchill kept the claymore angled at him one more second, making sure the man wasn't bluffing. Then he stood and followed the tracks leading toward the back of the church. The crypt door had been cracked open. Only a thin band of darkness showed through. A cold draft drifted up from below, carrying the smell of soil, damp stone, and something metallic. Not blood, machine oil. Churchill slid the bow off his shoulder and pressed 2 fingers to the hinge. It didn't squeak. Someone had oiled it recently. That told him everything he needed to know. This wasn't a frightened patrol stumbling into shelter. This was a planned hideout. He stepped down the first stair. You can almost feel the temperature drop as he moved deeper, the air thickening with a silence so complete it felt physical. His boots brushed across carved steps worn smooth by centuries of funerals and prayers. The farther he went, the darker it became, until the only light came from a small lantern hanging near the bottom. He stopped on the final step. 3 German soldiers were hunched around a field radio set on a stone table. Wires snaked across the floor toward an open crate of batteries and signal gear. One of the men held a notepad with coordinates scribbled across the page. Artillery coordinates. The kind that could level an entire company. Churchill exhaled, slow and quiet. The men hadn't heard him. They were too busy arguing in low German, tapping the dial, trying to punch a signal through the storm. He drew his bow. This place was so tight, he could feel the arrow scrape the wall as he pulled it back, his shoulders wedged against stone. The silence made every breath sound loud. Too loud, but the Germans kept their backs to him. He released. The first arrow hit the man with the notepad. He collapsed over the table, scattering the radio parts. The second soldier spun around, yelling as Churchill fired again. The arrow caught in the ribs, driving him backward. The third man grabbed his pistol and scrambled behind a stone pillar. Bullets cracked to the lantern glass, dropping the crypt into flickering half-light. Churchill crouched low, listening. The pistol clicked empty. He moved. His boots scraped across the stone, giving away his approach for half a second. The German lunged at the sound, swinging the pistol like a club. Churchill blocked his arm with his forearm and slammed him into the wall. The pistol fell. The soldier fought back, grabbing Churchill's coat and hammering a fist against his jaw. Churchill didn't flinch. He drove the claymore's hilt into the man's stomach, knocking the breath out of him. The soldier crumpled, coughing hard. Churchill pressed the edge of the blade under his chin. "Who were you signaling?" Churchill asked. The soldier's voice shook. "Artillery, 48 guns. Firing plan starts at dawn." Dawn. Churchill stepped back and looked at the notepad. Coordinates. Timings. Firing patterns. If this barrage hit the valley, entire battalions would be wiped out before breakfast. He tore the page free and pocketed it. Then he turned back to the staircase. But before he reached the first step, a distant rumble rolled through the church above. Heavy boots. More than one pair. Moving fast. He kept climbing, bow in hand. When he reached the top, he froze. The church door was now wide open. Rain blew inside like a curtain. Shadows moved across the courtyard. Dozens of them. More German infantry had arrived. A full platoon. Maybe more. They were spreading around the church, rifles raised, taking positions among the stones and rubble. Behind them, headlights cut through the rain. An armored car rolled into view. Churchill's jaw tightened. He'd taken out the scouts, the patrol, the tower team, and the crypt operators. But now an entire force was here for him, and there was no easy escape. He wasn't outnumbered. He was surrounded. The armored car stopped just outside the church courtyard, its engine rumbling through the storm like a trapped animal. Rain streaked across its steel plates. A spotlight flicked on and swept across the broken stone walls, illuminating helmets, rifles, and the unmistakable outlines of a full German platoon tightening its perimeter. Churchill watched from the shadows near the altar, bow in hand. His breathing stayed calm, but his pulse pushed a little harder now. You can almost feel the church vibrating under the weight of boots outside. He counted quickly. 20 men in the courtyard, more along the outer wall, 2 at the rear entrance. Machine gun team setting up behind sandbags near the fountain. They weren't here to search. They were here to seal the place. A voice barked an order in German. The armored car turret shifted. its machine gun angled toward the church door. Churchill closed his eyes for half a second. A direct burst from that gun would chew the old stone apart. He had to move before they opened up. He sprinted to the side of the nave, boots hitting the floor fast but controlled. Rain blew into the church from the broken windows, making the marble slick underfoot. He used it to slide behind a fallen pillar, just as the armored car fired. The blast echoed like thunder inside the sanctuary. Stone shattered. Dust exploded through the air. Pews splintered into flying shards of wood. Churchill stayed low as the gun tore a trench across the church interior. Sparks jumped where bullets scraped marble. The walls shook. Light from the spotlight stuttered through the dust like lightning flashes. When the barrage paused, German infantry rushed the front door. Churchill moved. He rose from behind the pillar and fired an arrow before the first man fully entered the doorway. The shot hit straight through the throat. The soldier dropped and tripped the man behind him, tangling them both in the doorway. Chaos erupted. German voices shouted. Boots clattered. Another burst from outside sprayed the entrance, sending chunks of stone across the floor. Churchill ran along the church's side aisle, using the broken pews for cover. A second squad tried to come through the window. He shot one, grabbed another arrow, and pivoted sharply to hit a soldier climbing over the sill. The man fell backward into the mud, but the Germans kept coming. They moved with discipline. Two pushed into the left aisle, while another team flanked along the right. Every time Churchill shifted position, they adjusted, tightening the net around him. He knew the rhythm of a closing trap. He'd felt it in Norway, in France, in Yugoslavia. The church couldn't hold much longer. He sprinted toward the side corridor leading to the vestry. Bullets chipped the stone behind him. One grazed his coat, ripping the fabric. Another tore through the bowstring, snapping it clean. The longbow went slack in his hand. He slowed, not because he was afraid, but because he knew what that meant. The bow had served him through 6 battles, 3 nations, and 1 impossible legend. It had given him 7 kills in 3 days. It had given him silence where rifles gave noise. Now it was gone. Churchill let it drop gently onto the vestry floor. He unbuckled the claymore. The weight of the blade settled into his palm like an old friend. If they wanted to storm a church to capture one man, he would give them a fight they would never forget. Footsteps echoed down the corridor. Shadows bled across the cracked doorway. German voices whispered commands. Churchill stepped into the center of the room and raised a claymore. Rain rattled on the roof above him. Lightning flashed through the broken window. Shouts came from both ends of the hall. One thought crossed his mind, quiet and steady. If I must go, I'll go loudly. Then the doors burst open. The vestry doors blew inward under the force of a German boot, which splintered across the floor as 3 soldiers rushed in with rifles raised. Their eyes widened when they saw what was waiting for them. Churchill didn't step back. He stepped forward. The claymore swept through the air with a sharp hiss. The first soldier tried to fire, but the blade caught his rifle and tore from his hands. Churchill pivoted, driving the flat of the blade into the man's temple. He dropped instantly. The second soldier fired a burst that tore through Churchill's coat. The rounds missed by inches. Churchill closed the distance in 2 strides and slammed the pommel of the claymore into the man's jaw. The soldier crumpled, face first, into the broken doorway. The third soldier froze. For a moment, the room felt suspended in time. Rain thundered on the roof. Lightning flashed white through the window. The German stared at Churchill like he was staring at something impossible. He fired. Churchill deflected the shot with the side of the claymore. The bullet sparked against the steel and ricocheted into the wall. The German stumbled backward, tripping over a fallen hymnal rack. Churchill let him run. There were larger problems now. More boots thundered in the nave. More voices shouted outside. The armored car rolled closer, its engine revving as the turret rotated toward the vestry window. Churchill moved fast, ducking into the narrow passage behind the choir loft. The storm wind whipped through the shattered glass as bullets hammered the stone behind him. He sprinted through the passageway until he reached a side arch that opened onto the choir platform. From here, he could see into the nave. Dozens of soldiers were inside now, sweeping row by row, clearing corners, shouting his position back and forth. He wasn't dealing with a squad anymore. He was dealing with a force. They'd realized by now that someone in this church had killed the crypt team, the scouts, the tower men, and the advance patrol. The Germans didn't know they were fighting one officer. They thought they were fighting an entire detachment, and they were tightening the noose. Churchill scanned for an exit. None. Roof? Maybe. Bell tower? Ruined. Front door? Covered. Side entrance? Pinned. Then he noticed something most men wouldn't have. The storm. The wind direction had shifted sharply, blowing to the choir loft window and out the nave doors. Hard enough to knock over standing boards. Hard enough to slam shutters against stone. Hard enough to move smoke. Churchill stepped back into the vestry and grabbed the lantern the Germans had dropped. Its flame sputtered from the gunfire shock, but it was still alive. He carried it to the stack of broken pew wood and hymnals near the doorway. He didn't need an explosion. He just needed confusion, though it caught quickly. Smoke rolled up toward the rafters, filling the air with a hot, acrid haze. Within seconds, the storm wind pulled it into the nave. Shouts erupted. Coughing. Orders barked in German. The soldiers scattered as the smoke crawled across the floor and up the aisles, cutting visibility to almost nothing. The armored car fired another burst through the window, but the heavy smoke swallowed the muzzle flashes. Churchill used the chaos. He grabbed a fallen rifle, slung it over his shoulder, and pushed through the side corridor until he reached the confessional booth near the rear door. Smoke filled the church faster now, blinding the men inside. He slipped out the back. The courtyard behind the church was muddy and lit only by the storm. The rain hit him like needles, soaking his coat instantly. He kept low, darting between gravestones and broken walls. But the Germans weren't blind. One spotted him through the smoke and shouted. A rifle cracked. Dirt jumped at his feet. Churchill sprinted toward the outer wall. Claymore bouncing against the side. Boots splashed behind him as soldiers poured out of the smoke-filled nave. Another shot. Then another. He reached the wall, vaulted over a broken section, and landed hard in the wet grass outside. The forest loomed ahead, dark, dense, and alive with the sound of wind through the trees. He looked back only once. The church glowed orange behind the smoke as the small fire grew. The Germans rushed to contain it. Shouting over the storm, Churchill turned and ran into the trees. Not because he was retreating, but because dawn was only hours away, and he still carried the artillery coordinates in his pocket. If he didn't reach Allied command by sunrise, thousands of men would die. The forest swallowed him almost instantly. Branches whipped against his coat. Mud clung to his boots. The storm kept the canopy alive with movement, turning every shadow into something that looked like it could breathe. Churchill pushed forward anyway. He knew the valley layout. He'd memorized it days earlier while studying maps with the battalion commander. The nearest British position was 5 miles west. Normally, that was a simple march. Tonight, it felt like crossing another continent, especially with a platoon hunting him. He checked his pocket again. The folded page of the German firing coordinates was still there, soaked but readable. He pressed it against his chest to keep it dry. Everything depended on delivering it. A distant whistle cut through the storm. Then another. German signal flares burst above the treetops, painting the forest with white light. Shadows stretched and twisted across the mud. Churchill pressed himself behind a fallen tree and watched as the beams from the armored car swept across the churchyard. They knew he'd escaped. Now they were widening the search. He started moving again, staying low, weaving through the thickest brush. Rain dripped from every branch. The wind carried the sound of shouting Germans trying to fan out into the forest. He could outrun them on foot, but not if they found the trail. Ahead, a shallow creek cut through the forest floor. He slid down the bank and stepped into it, letting the water swallow his footprints. The current pulled at his boots, cold enough to make his legs sting. He followed the creek north for 100 yards before climbing back onto solid ground. Lightning flashed overhead. For a moment, the entire forest turned white. He saw movement. 2 Germans on a ridge to the east. One more near a cart path ahead. They were fanning out faster than he expected. Churchill knelt beside a fallen log and considered his options. He couldn't keep running blindly. He needed to move smart. He reached for the German rifle he'd taken from the crypt. It was loaded. He checked the chamber, slung it tighter, and continued west, keeping the uneven terrain where patrols would be slower. Another flare burst overhead, this time red. That wasn't a search signal. It was a warning. Enemies sighted. He ducked behind a cluster of heavy oaks and peered into the distance. Through the curtain of rain, he spotted them. 5 Germans sweeping the slope below him with disciplined precision, weapons raised. One of them paused. He knelt, touched the ground, lifted his fingers. Mud.